Welcome to the Grad School Fem Touring Podcast. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez Vu, and I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with tips and tricks and everything else you need to know to get into graduate school. For the past 10 years, I've been helping undergraduate students get into top graduate programs in their field, and I'm really excited to share this information with you too.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am really excited because we have another amazing guest speaker. Today, we have Ana Barba, who is going to be talking to us all about finding mentors, from connecting with faculty to overcoming the nerves to going to office hours and even like developing relationships for letters of rec in the future. She's going to talk about all of that and
all of those
more.
Things.
So Ana, before we have you get started, I would love to, I'm just going to go ahead and read your bio to the audience. So Ana Barba is currently a PhD candidate in ChicanX Studies at UC Santa Barbara. Her research project looks at the impacts of the use of metal detectors in K through 12. She received her BA in Ethnic Studies from Humboldt State University and a master's in ChicanX Studies from CSU Los Angeles, Cal State LA. She loves doing research, teaching, and most of all, mentoring the younger generation to where they want to go. She's also the founder of the Latina Chika Speaks magazine. Check it out. And podcast, listen to that, where you can find different podcast shows and categories from which to read articles from. So check it out at Latina Chika Speaks magazine.com. Welcome,
Yes.
Ana.
Yes, a lot of words for that website, huh?
It's okay. Mine too. Grad school from
touring.
So I would love for you to just get us started with telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, backstory, and anything you'd like to share.
So I'm Ana, and I was raised in Inglewood, California. My mom migrated here from El Salvador, and my dad migrated here from Tepatitlan, Jalisco. My mom's from El Salvador, San Salvador, El Salvador, from the capital, but more away from the city part of it. And my parents came here. Well, my dad came here when he was about like 6 or 9, I want to say 6. But he had lost his mom around that age. So my grandfather had remarried. And my mom came in her early 20s during the Civil War in El Salvador as a political refugee with my grandmother and her sister and her sibling. And growing up in Inglewood was kind of cool because my dad grew up there. Since they migrated there, a lot of the people in that area that we were in were from Tepatitlan, Jalisco. So some of them, if not all of them, already knew our family from Tepa. So it was like, I didn't grow up in Mexico. My dad was undocumented, so it wasn't easy for us to go and visit. So I don't have that experience with my Mexican side of the family. I don't have like an understanding of the culture as much as other people do who get the opportunity to go back and visit family. My dad, just couldn't. And he tried a few times. We did get to go. I don't know how. I just got there. But I think that when my dad passed away a few years ago, and when I buried him, he requested he be buried in Mexico. I want to say that was actually one of the first times I actually got to see how people communicate and share space with each other in that culture and where my dad came from. And so many things made sense about how my dad communicated with people, how he bonded with people, how he even started relationships with people. And the reason I bring that up too is because my dad is a big influence as to how I network with people. Like he was my teacher on how to network or how to talk to people, how to request for resources, or how to politely, request things when you go somewhere, or just asking a worker how they're doing, something people rarely ever ask. And I just think those are kinds of skills, those people skills are the reasons why I was a little bit more confident in approaching professors as an undergrad and as a grad student. But I think that if it hadn't been for my dad being like, oh, these people are not scary, like you can totally talk to whomever you want, these, just be kind, be open, allowed me to have that confidence. But definitely, like, I don't think everybody has an outgoing parent who's like, I know everyone down the block and I know everyone in the city. Like when my dad passed away, everyone that I bumped into in that like area would always say like, hi, tu papa would always talk about you. How's your PhD program, or how's this? And I'd be like, oh my God, he talks about everything, And he was like, like, so when you're in that community and all these people, you kind of start to realize, okay, you have a bond. It's not just these artificial like connections, which I think you see a lot in the academia world, right? Like you kind of see people who are like, oh, we're just like, acquaintances. Oh, we just work together. Oh, you're in the cubicle next to me. But I think my dad kind of was like, nobody's worth that little bit of time. Everyone's worth every single minute of your time. So I think that's where I kind of learned how to bond with people and ask for stuff. And yeah, I grew up with like public school experience. I was not in honors. I was not an avid kid. I definitely was not on the roster of kids to go to college, let alone a kid that they even believed in getting a PhD. Even less so, I never thought I'd be getting my PhD. I think as a public school kid who just was not in the route of college, I always felt like I was just trying to figure out how to get there versus like knowing that I'm gonna get there and then just trying to figure out what I want to do. It was more like, what do I have to do to get there?
Yes.
And that was already a challenge of its own. And I'm sure in your program, a lot of people come here because they are like me, a first gen first gen college student who has no idea what we were doing or what we're doing even half the time. And we don't have no guidance, of elders who have previously done this. So that was my experience. And then I wanted to quickly just add that even though I was not on the college track, it was never in my home like, oh, you're not being like driven to college, so you're not going. It was always, 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 you're going to college.
Wow.
And it never really made sense to me because they had no idea how to get me there, but it was always like, tu vas a ir. And so when college time came around, I just remember thinking, well, my parents believe in me. I have to go. I have to figure out how. But I can't say that I had the school counselor or somebody who was like, tracking me. They just weren't, And lastly, I fucking bugged the hell out of my honors and avid and AP class friends, and I'd be like, who came to your classroom today? I saw someone came to speakers, and they'd go, oh, the financial aid person, oh, this person. And I'd be writing it down with my friend because me and my best friend, who was another Salvadorian girl, we'd be like, there's no way we're getting shut out of this knowledge or these resources. Like, we need to ask these questions. The cool part was that we were all friends. So it was like, yeah, girl, like this happened. And then, they didn't realize that knowledge they were getting was actually not being like funneled out to everyone. So that's how I actually ended up in college for my undergrad. It was like me and my friends just doing anything and everything to figure out what it would take, and some teachers were like, oh, there's a fee waiver, oh, there's this, or let me help you with financial aid, which was really useful, but we would have never known what it was unless we had asked, right? So I think there's like a disconnect there. Like, if you're in public school, you're a brown kid, you're poor, you're probably not going to be told how to get to college. And to some people that seems like it's easy, you just apply. It's not that easy for us. It's not even, we can't even fathom that yet. Like, we barely know how to pay for an application, and we didn't even know we had a fee waiver until, we hit financial aid. So it's just a process that's so new that we have no idea what's coming next, really. Like, we're just, what's next? So, and am I gonna make it? Like, am I gonna be successful at this? I have no idea what I'm doing.
It's so wild to me because I feel like a lot of us who are first gen, we have so many parallels in our stories. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't talk about my own dad a lot, but he did have that positive influence for me too. Growing up,
Yeah.
I was very, very shy. And my dad, I would call him Perico because he just wouldn't shut his mouth. And because of that, he would be late to everything and make me late to
Oh my
everything.
God, me and your dad is here, Leo. No, I'm just kidding.
Scorpio.
I'm like, oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
But
no, I feel him. Like that's my dad too. And I feel like you know, when people say I'm sure they don't do that with you because you're calladita, pero with me they're like, God, you're your dad's daughter, you know, like he molded you to exactly him, you know, and
But it's
I,
interesting because we
you
probably
know,
had similar fathers, but we're still, I mean, not exactly the same. Like for me, my dad was always late to everything. So now I'm super punctual and he was very, very outgoing. I still struggle to be fully like outgoing, but I learned a lot of those skills of like networking and community building from him. And same
yeah.
like your parents, my parents were always like, I don't know how, but you're going to figure it out. You're going to find a way to go to college and get a
Yes,
job and do X, Y, and Z. So
yes.
I wanted to actually, because it's really interesting and helpful to hear about your backstory of how you even got to college
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, hearing about your dad's influence, hearing about growing up in Inglewood and, you know, where your family's from, how far you've come. I'm curious how you got to where you're at now in terms of grad school, like what led you
Mm-hmm.
to pursuing grad school and your current PhD program.
So, um, I guess I should give a little bit of backstory to my undergrad experience. I did not enjoy my undergrad experience as much as I did enjoy my friendships. I did enjoy the activism that I was doing to combat the horrible experiences or the uncomfortable environment we were in as people of color in Northern Cal in a predominantly white rural, you know, in a forest, Humboldt State community. And we are city kids. A lot of us were from LA or the Bay Area. And I remember que I just didn't enjoy my time. I was actually a journalism major before ethnic studies major. And I had a class that was one of my first journalism classes, one of the first ones. And I remember I brought up something. It was at the time when they had Moodle. I don't remember Moodle. It was like a little like online thing where professors. I know we have that now. Like I don't know what it would be called now, but and they have like forum, and you would go and say, you know, the professor would ask a question and you'd go and respond. And this one was like a halfway into the quarter. What do you think the class is doing, or how it's doing, or what you've been reading? And she was a pretty like social justice, you know, very like critically aware of how media influences, you know, people of certain, you know, ethnicities, or how it values, you know, white supremacy or capitalism or Christianity, at least in this country. And I remember saying, I love everything we're reading, everything's cool, blah blah blah. But my classmates sometimes say things that are insensitive to communities of color, or how they reference them. Right at the time, we had just made undocumented you know, official, and to stop calling people illegal aliens, right? That was just a term that you needed to stop using. And the pushback was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So it was like, so I said something like, I feel uncomfortable, you know, and I hope that if my classmates plan to be journalists, that they figure out how to address these communities in a very, you know, empathetic and sensitive way. And it led into like a full um, like discussion of like how I was trying to be a martyr for my people. I was trying to pull the race card on them, you know, predominantly white kids classroom. And it went on for months. I want to say like the professor personally called my cell phone that weekend and was like, stop answering these people. These people are freaking, you know, or she didn't say freaking, right? She was super, you know, educated or whatever. And she was like, you know, don't answer them. I'm watching and I'm going to handle it. And I'm 18. I'm like, okay, you're gonna handle it. And she couldn't handle that. You can't handle 40 racist kids or 40 ignorant kids saying like, we aren't doing anything wrong. You are just trying to find a problem, and racism is gone, and you're dumb or something. And so I remember I was in organizing already, so I had some of my friends come and see how they were treating me after that. Because after that, it wasn't cool. It was like I was getting mad dogged every day. People were like rolling their eyes, scuffing if I even raised my hand.
This was
It was just
throughout taking the class, or did it stand after the class too?
No, it was during the class time. And then I remember I had my friends come. We were a part of this Women of Color Liberation Army, which I wrote my master's thesis on, was that experience. And I have them stand on the wall of the class, and the professor was like, I don't know why you did this, but because of everything that's going on, I'm gonna allow it, but don't do this again. And I was like, whatever. And that led to, okay, but guys, I don't know if you guys remember MySpace, but it led to a MySpace war, because then they started a MySpace page saying like, fuck this Latina and her fucking friends, and they're fucking ridiculous. And I started getting followed home because Arcata is really small. It's like a small town. And so the college, you literally just walk over a bridge, and then it's like apartments and like houses and whatever. So I would walk home, and I remember seeing people follow me. And then it got really fucking serious, and it got into the point where they started a freedom of speech campaign. And they had their campaign on the middle of the campus, and people didn't even know it was connected to my class. They thought it was something else. Even some people even thought it had to do with social justice. So they were like, yeah, and they were like, wait, you're against some brown, what? And so they brought came to class to challenge me, and they brought shirts and pins, and made us read the preamble and how freedom of speech is allowed. And I was like, I never silenced you. I asked you to be considerate and a little bit more educated about what you plan to do as a journalist who's going to be in my community. Like, what are we talking about? And it spurted out to the point where the chair of the department of the chair of the department asked me, do you want to continue this course, or do you want to take it online, or do you just want to withdraw? And I was like, so that's it. That nothing happens to these students who have been absolutely, ruthless to me. Okay. So I quit journalism there. I had a dream to be a journalist. I was set on it. But I had already taken ethnic study classes, and my friends were taking them, who I had made through EOP, the Educational Opportunity Program. If anybody's listening, that's how the homies are made. And your ride or dies, because we just have such similar backgrounds that we understand sometimes what the struggle is, right? Anyways, that happened, and I ended up in ethnic studies. So I didn't have a good time. So by the time I got my bachelor's, which I did in 3 years, because I had been begging my mom to let me come back to LA, and she was like, you're not transferring. I don't know what transferring is. And it sounds like you're fucking up and you're not coming back until you finish, type of thing. I finished in 3 years. I was taking 21 to 22 units a quarter. And I was organizing. And I was working, sometimes I was working 3 jobs to pay, rent, and, be able to go out to eat dinner with my roommates or something, right? And I just remember graduating and feeling like I never want to go back to that place. I hate academia. I hated the power trips with professors. I hated the fact that I wrote my heart and soul. And as an ESL kid, it was heartbreaking to get papers back and have them absolutely dissected and devoured with red pen, and saying what kind of writing is this, or and feeling do I even belong? Imposter syndrome, I just start kicking in, do I really belong here? I am an ESL kid, maybe this place is not built for me, and it is built for you. It's just you're gonna work extra harder. Unfortunately, our educational system failed me, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. Not that it's okay, but you have to work through that. So I quit for a year. I was in a CC trying not to pay my loans and trying to finish one class that I needed to finish that I didn't know I had missed out on. Yeah,
can you clarify when you said you quit for a year? This was after
I had
finishing,
just
taking a break, or
yeah, I took a break after my BA, but in between that, I took CC classes because I found out I was missing one elective class, and I was like, really?
Okay.
So I ended up doing like dance or something ridiculous at the CC. But I ended up taking a Native American Studies class and a Chicano Studies class because I was like, if I'm gonna be at CC, I might as well take things I want to take at the same time. So I'm a full-time student. And in the Chicano Studies class, the professor was so much fun. Andrew Monzon, if you're listening, you're amazing. And he had gone through the same master's program at Cal State LA. And I remember telling him, I don't want to go to grad school. I'm horrible, like at test taking, like, what are you doing? And he was like, dude, you don't need a GRE, like score, you just need to apply. And that sold me. I was like, I can go back to school and I can go into Chicano Studies and I can do what I want to do and I don't have to take a GRE. Come again? What? Because I did horribly in the SATs. I took that shit twice, never made it even to 1,000. I was so embarrassed.
I did horrible. I don't even want to look at the number. Same with the GRE.
Yeah, so for me, like I was really nervous, but when I got my master's, well, in between that time, I kept having nightmares about me having a paper due, and like I would always wake up like, tengo que levantarme a hacer mi papel, and I'd be like, I'm ready to school, and I'd be like, you know what? That means my subconscious really wants to write, and I think I'm missing something. And I read it, and then I ended up in the master's program in Chicano Studies. Loved it, loved research, loved doing every part of, maybe not classes, because I know my classmates are probably, girl, you could play through the whole time. And it's true. I was like a little complaining little, person. I was like, why are we reading more recent stuff? Why isn't there more women of color? But like, valid points, guys, but I had a good time. And I thought that was the end for me with my master's. I thought I can teach now. Unfortunately, when I started applying to schools, I never had teaching experience because the master's program just does not have room for that kind of teaching. Like some of them do on their own because they want to and they understand you need it, but you're working so hard just to get a master's in 2 years that they're like, you don't need to be TAing or having this kind of experience. So I wasn't getting callbacks because it was like, we have nothing to base your teaching experience because you just don't have any. And I felt so like, oh my God, I have a master's in Chicano Studies and I can't even teach as a professor because nobody, believes in me, and sometimes it is about network. And again, back to being a first gen, you just don't know anyone to like hook you up with a job. And so after a year of like depression, I guess, I said, you know what, I'm going to go back and get my PhD. And I remember Andrew, as I just talked about, he was teaching at a CC in Chicano Studies and just had his master's in Chicano Studies. And they told him that he needed a master's in history or he just couldn't teach really anymore because he needed a mainstream major, right? On top of the Chicano Studies to be able to teach Chicano Studies at a CC, whatever. And I remember he was like, be warned or something. And I was like, and then I was like, you know what? I get my PhD in Chicano Studies. Nobody can stop me from teaching Chicano Studies. How are you going to deny a PhD to teach Chicano Studies? That makes no sense. That's an absolute lawsuit right there, And by then, hopefully I have the money to fucking sue somebody for that shit.
That's right.
But that's how I felt, like I didn't, so I ended up applying to PhD programs for that reason. I wanted to teach. And I enjoyed research. And then by the time I went into the PhD program, I fell in love with research and I fell in love with teaching even more. So being at a UCU or a UCSB as well, we're at a research institute and that's all, what it's about. And I don't want to say I'm like fully sold on just research. But it definitely is nice to be in a school that has all those resources and focuses so much on that. Because comparing even just libraries like Cal State and even a CC library, is like, it's embarrassing, and I remember being at the CC because that's where all my friends from high school were. And I was thinking, this library is shit. Like, it is literally like the donations of a Goodwill, basically, compared to the libraries I've been in, and it was unfortunate because these are the kinds of libraries where people in CC are supposed to thrive. And these are my friends, and I'm like, they deserve books that are way more current. They deserve more books than they already have. They deserve a 3-story library versus 1, so just all those things took me back to a PhD for sure. And I just thought, let's see if I can. And I got into one of 5. I applied to 5, I'll be honest, and I got rejected. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you get rejected all the time. The first time is always rejection. But the school that I got into, UCSB, was my top school aside from UCLA. They was like a C, you know, and UCLA rejected me, and I was so like bummed about it. But and I know
okay.
you're a brew.
I went to UCLA and I'm no longer there. So
I know. And like I lived in LA, so it just made sense for me to stay, you know, because then I could, you know, commute. But then being at Santa Barbara, I realized I would have hated that commute because
everything happens for a reason.
Yes. And you know what, I enjoyed my time at UC. Then you're gonna ask me more, so go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanted to react to everything that you're saying because you've said so much and I'm trying to process and reflect on it. And I just, well, first off, want to thank you because the way that you're reflecting on your backstory, you're being so real and honest and raw and in sharing, like kind of unfiltered your experience. Like what I would consider what you experienced as in undergrad is a nightmare scenario for any student of color. It's being attacked by white students. It's being at a primarily white or PWI institution. Just complete and utter just toxicity. And like you said the, how did you say it? The educational system failed me. And for a lot of individuals, that would have resulted in them being pushed out and leaving and saying, forget this. F this, I'm leaving.
And it totally did. I watched friends get pushed out of the university so quickly, and even have post-traumatic stress from racist situations, not just
and you telling
campus,
me having nightmares
outside.
about papers, that is to me, it could be considered a trauma response, or it could be considered PTSD. It could be considered whatever you want to call it, but you experience toxicity, and that's the real truth, that it can happen, and it does happen to students of color. And yet you took some time off, ended up going back to the classes, ended up getting your master's, loving it, and now realizing you want to go back, you want to teach, and you wanted to get your PhD, and you're enjoying the research. So it's just really fascinating to me because there's the good, the bad, the ugly. You've been sharing some of the ugly, but you're also sharing like the reasons why you're still here. So
I mean, PhD program, I haven't even dug into how nightmarish that process is,
we can,
you know.
that's a whole separate podcast topic, which we might have you come back to.
I wanted to be honest about the fact that you know is also there, you know, that even though I went through what I went through, I don't think I was still prepared for what grad school is, what it entails aside from just your courses, right? Like there's a whole other experience. I'm sure it's all over your show, so you guys check it out, find the resources to get you through those things.
And you keep mentioning some of the folks that have helped you along the way, so this brings us to the topic today of finding mentors. And you know, I would love to hear more like your approach on finding mentors, on connecting, and even just like getting yourself out of, you know, your little shell and putting yourself out there.
I definitely, so from the experience with undergrad, for sure, in grad school, I became very, very defensive, and I put my wall up really high with not just people, but with faculty and even workers in the department, because I felt like I had gone through so much and nothing was done, you know, by the administration, that I felt like I can be friends with these people, but I cannot fully trust or believe that these people are going to have my back 100% the entire time I'm here. And I have to protect myself. Unfortunately, I was very right. And I wish I wasn't. I really wish. As a matter of fact, I thought that going into ChicanX Studies, where a bunch of people are going to look like me, was going to be the best decision ever, because people weren't going to be cutthroat, or there wasn't going to be competition, or just this like bubble idea that everybody's about everybody being successful and about helping everybody getting out. And that's just unfortunately not true. I don't know what it is, if it's the university setting, if it's the politics. I just don't know what makes it that way. And I just remember being like uber protective about that. So when I started talking to faculty, so for my program, you come in with one faculty member already, your advisor, which is your main person who's going to guide you.
So that's
And
like determined right when you go in, you know who your advisor is.
Yeah, because so when you write your application, you normally, the best thing you can do, and if you guys are writing your applications next year, because I think we're done now, you, or at the end of this year, I guess, you want to put in there what at least 3 professors you would potentially work with, because the idea is you want to go into a department where people are going to help you. If you don't find similarities or a way for faculty to help you with your project, maybe that's their specialty or they're around that area, then if you don't have anyone to help you with your project, you're not going to get in. Not because your project isn't amazing. It probably is super amazing. Unfortunately, if there's no faculty to guide you and help you, what's the point of you being in that department when all you're going to feel is you're by yourself and nobody can give you the resources or guidance or theories or any of these things that you need in order to make your research, progress. And so when I applied, I wrote these different people I wanted to work with, and then they told me one of them was going to be my advisor. Some programs allow for that to change. I did change mine. It didn't go as well as I thought it was going to go. And anyways, that's not the person I wanted to talk about. I actually wanted to talk about a person that I ended up feeling like we were very much alike, which is Dr. Inés Talamantes from Religious Studies. She started the Native American and Indigenous Studies, Religious Studies, Native American Traditions, Religious Traditions minor and major. That was my BFF. That was familia. When I started at UCSB back in early 2013 or something crazy like that, one of my best friend's little sisters, who was my best friend, she was my best friend my entire time from middle school to high school. One of her younger sisters went to UCSB. And when I got to UCSB for my PhD, she was like, I'm getting my BA. And I was like, yay. But she was like, but I have someone you need to meet. And I was like, okay. And she was like, there's a woman in religious studies, a Chicana, indigenous woman, who wants to meet you. She heard there's a PhD Chicana in town and she wants to meet you and she needs to know who you are. And I was like, okay, porque we were raised with parents who are very much about our culture and our tradition. So I knew, okay, I need to do whatever she says because she definitely knows what's up and I need to be respectful of this. I went to go meet Inés with her and it was like a match made in heaven, of course. If anybody ever met Inés Talamantes, your heart would melt for this woman. She is such a sweetheart. And when I met her, she was like, Mija, like I've been hearing you're here and I wanted to meet you because you're in Chicano studies and if things go awry or you need help, like I'm always here. My door is always open. And I was like, okay, I'm not in this PhD program, religious studies, but I could still potentially have her on my committee. And I remember she was so sweet. She was like, Mira. And, she was very down and honest. She was like, mira, this is going to be hard work, y no te tienes que olvidar de dónde vienes, and you have to like do everything that they say as they say it, learn or whatever, pero never forget who you are, never forget where you came from. And I remember I told my dad, because at the time she was 83 years old when I started. And I remember I told my dad, conocí una muchacha, una señora, right? And es maestra and me quiere ayudar y no sé, I don't know, like, I'm going to try to work with her. And I was like, how old is she? And I was like, 83. And she was like, oh, ya has estado trabajando ahí desde los años. Mira, mija, tú le vas a ayudar con todo. I was like, mira, mija, you're going to learn from this woman. She's going to have all the knowledge you need. She's been there for so long and she is a woman of color and she's going to teach you the ropes. You need to listen to everything she has to say. You need to help her with anything she needs, and you need to learn whatever you can from her. Best advice my father could have ever given me, because that woman was such a blessing. And she's part of my committee. Like, even though she passed right before COVID, before I moved out. And it was one of the cutest things during my hold on. So my dad, yeah, he told me to work with her, and I remember when I started working with her, she ended up in my committee. And the day of my defense of my committee to advance so that I could go do the research in my MA, she came in with like a piece of foil. And I was like, ¿Qué traines? And then I did my presentation, and everybody was like, this is a great project, move forward, go do the research, go into the field. And she's like, wait, I have something to say. You know, she's not my main committee member. My main committee is Edwina Barbosa, amazing woman. I don't have time to talk about the amazing things she's done for me, but for Inez, she was like, tengo que decir algo. We're like, ¿qué pasó? She unwraps the fucking foil, and there's a chile quemado in there. And she's like, I just wanted to remind you, because when I read this, it sounded really white. And I just want to remind you, wherever you end up, that this is who you are. Never forget that, you know, and try your best, and try your best to sugar. I got it. Yeah, she was just like, just do your best at, you know, what you do, but never forget who you are. And I was like, she is so freaking crazy and silly, but I understood what she meant, because there's not that many of us up here. Women of color with a PhD are rare, like so rare. A woman of color as a professor then is even rarer. So for her, she was just like, do, you know, you, but never forget, you know, who you are, because these students are going to need you. And she was a great mentor. She was like a great example of that. And I worked with her for like $20 or something a week or something, and I would just help her check her emails and stuff. But in those conversations we would have every morning, we would get our coffee and like a little, I forget what it was, a bear claw. She loved these bear claws. Oh my god. Y era diabética, so I wasn't the best influence either. My parents are both diabetic. Well, my dad was diabetic, he passed from that. But
Sorry.
so like so I the conversations we had all the time, as a matter of fact, she was really close to her dad, and he had passed. So a lot of our like conversations were about the heavy amounts of love we had for our fathers. So when I lost my dad, I lost her like a little bit after. It was really interesting, but I just always went back to like how beautiful she talked about her dad, and how I eventually wanted to have the opportunity to share stories about my dad and not feel like breaking and like, you know, being like, oh, he's not here, like, you know, and kind of like being more at peace with it. And so she gave me so many more resources beyond just the academic world, and that is an amazing mentor. Now, is every mentor you're going to find on campus like that? No. And you need to know there's different kinds of mentors. Like, I have mentors who are just strictly for academic stuff. They don't want to hear your personal stuff. They don't want to hear you know, how you're struggling with like your emotional or your whatever. They just want to read your stuff, and that's great. I'll appreciate that. And other professors are more in tune, and unfortunately a lot of them are women of color, who will ask the more tougher questions, like, how are you balancing this? How are you doing? Are you seeking therapy? Are you, you know, because going through loss, of course you should be seeking therapy. So I think those are the kinds of questions that I don't think male professors often ask, or white white male professors even, who dominate the university still. Those are not the kinds of questions most of them will ask. Some will, I'm not even gonna fake it, because there is good white professors, but it's just really difficult to go through what you go through without people understanding, you know, like diabetes in the Latino community. Hello, like
yeah.
such a huge problem. Both my parents have it. And so losing my dad to it was kind of like a wake up call, like, hey, this is an issue in our community. And, you're not any different than, not to like shame myself and be like, don't be sad because everybody else is going through it, but more like there's an issue here. And, it's part of the medical industry system that, maybe failed my dad in some ways, although my dad had his own downfalls. So yin and yang.
Yeah. One thing I'm hearing from you, I mean, that comes to mind for me is like sometimes we don't know when you're reaching out for a mentor if they're going to be, what kind of mentor they're going to be. Like, are they going to be receptive to things? Like you might share something personal, what's going on with your family's health or the passing of your dad. And like you said, like, you don't know, but it's more often than not that it's, women or women of color who are providing this kind of feminized labor. And it's, the white professors or the male professors who, like you said, they're just there to like for academic support
do the
only,
academic,
and that's
do
it.
the
They don't ask
research.
the holistic questions like, how are you, making sure that your like mind, body, spirit is okay.
Right.
And so it's just like, for me, I always wonder, because when I was an undergrad, I struggled with finding mentors and finding good mentors, like, because I always, I guess because I was an English major and a predominantly white department, every time I met with someone, I felt like they made me feel like I was bugging them. Not that I felt, they made me feel like I was wasting their time. And so I'm wondering, like, what advice you would give to students of color that maybe they are feeling discouraged, especially a whole year and a half of like being on Zoom world and feeling like no one's responding to their emails. They can't just go to a physical office for office hours. Like, how do they make these connections?
Yeah. Well, I think as an undergrad, I think I remember feeling like, why are more professors more understanding? Why are they more empathetic? From my lens, right? From my experience, from where I'm at. As a grad student now, seeing like the professor position and seeing like what they're balancing, what they're going through, or who they are, right? Some people are just introverted and they really have an amazing way of doing research, but they have a horrible way of being social or even communicating with people or working with students, working with colleagues. And at first I used to think, damn, shouldn't they go to a training or something? But putting myself in that position, I think everybody should be allowed to be themselves, right, in the university. And if you're an introvert and you just cannot communicate with people, or let's say you have ADHD or you're autistic or something, and you just communicate differently than what other people are used to, then people can perceive it, like myself, as like, damn, that person sucks or something, right? Or that person just doesn't want to talk with people. And in reality, they're just having a tough time engaging in a social space or in a social environment. And so sometimes you got to catch these people alone, and yeah, if they're not answering their emails or, during office hours, they obviously look like they have 1,000 other things they're worrying about. They probably do. Unfortunately, I don't want anybody to think that everyone can be a mentor. And I've had people tell me they never even found one professor that helped them. And some people find workers on campus. Like I remember one of the ladies from financial aid became a really good friend of mine, and she would invite me to her home and she would, make me breakfast or something. And that was really useful. But was she my professor? No, but she had gone to Harvard and didn't finish her PhD program. So she had a lot of resources and advice that she wanted to give me that I wasn't getting from the professors, but I was getting from her because she felt like I didn't make it because it was a lot going on, but I think you're smart enough to make it to grad school, and I want you to know these things, And that's the one thing that I will say, like, don't ever think that mentorship only can come from a professor on campus, because that's just not true. You're in the McNair program, you're in like a prime example of someone on campus who is not a professor but has the most resources that anybody could need for grad school, right? Or for schooling or for academics, right? And I think that people just don't do that, you know, they don't realize that they have programs or people out on campus that are that stem beyond, you know, the department you're in. But you do need someone from your department, and that's the hung up, because you try to find someone and you don't know how to communicate or how to like bond with these people. Like I said, I thought I could make community with anyone. I thought if I'm nice enough and I just say hello and I'm you know, courteous and respectful, they should want to help me. And that's just not true. But if you keep showing up to their office hours and you keep talking with them, even though maybe last week they were having a really fucked up week and they were overwhelmed, but maybe this week you caught them and they're like totally in tune to whatever the hell you're talking about this week. On that day, you want to ask them, hey, would you be interested in being a mentor? You know, for me, like I'm having a tough time. On those good days, you want to catch them and you want to ask. Now, if they say I have too many students, I have too much going on, believe me, they do. They really do. I think that as a grad student, you have the opportunity, and I don't want to be like, you're going to be there forever, but I've been here for almost 10 years, so kind of. But sometimes those advisors you really want to work with don't have room for you when you first walk through the door. But then students graduate at the end of the year. And let's say 2 of them graduated from that person's like cohort or their you know, whatever, however students they're mentoring. And all of a sudden there's this room for people, and you come back and you're like, hey, remember me? Like I came here last year, I came here 3 years ago, I'm still here. You want to mentor me? I know so-and-so graduated. They might say, yeah, I have the time now. Or no, I just don't see myself in this project. I don't know how I can fit into this project. And that's something else you got to be like, okay with. Like if somebody says, I don't see how I fit in, but you do, you totally see how they fit in, but they don't push it, because at the end of the day, that's going to be a horrible working experience, because you're forcing something onto someone, and eventually they're just going to hate you or be bitter or just not even put the kind of energy that someone who would love to be part of your project, who would love the idea, who wants you to do the best project ever, will give you, versus someone who's half-assing and being like, well, yeah, she wanted a mentor, you know. And that's just for grad school. As an undergrad, take anyone, like anyone who's willing to help you, knock yourself out. But also just recognize that not everyone is going to mentor you the same, and not everyone's going to mentor you on the same things. But at the end of the day, you want to kind of like have a balance. Like, okay, this person I can talk to about my personal life, this person I can talk to about grad school, this person I can talk to about writing essays, this person, and you kind of like start picking out who's what. But again, like for someone who has a tough time approaching people, I think this is scary to think, oh my God, I have to find 5 different people to do 5 different things for me. And that's just not what I'm also saying, but I am saying that's a full advantage, and that's you should try to. But if you only can find one mentor and that's all you can do, that's fine. And you know, take advantage of that one mentor or advisor. But try to have more than one. Try to go outside of your department. Try to like just look in other places for people to help you, because they're out there and they're going to help you in ways that you just didn't imagine. You know, like Ines Talamantes, again, was not in my committee at the beginning, was not in my department. I would have never found her had not my friend's sister, you know, known her already. But showing up at her door was the best decision I could have ever made, you know? So even when you don't know somebody and somebody says, oh, I know somebody who can potentially help you, take it up. It might be an Yvette, it might be an Inez, it might be an Anna, like you never know. And that might be the person you end up vibing the best with, and you might vibe with them for the rest of your career, who can potentially help you, you know? I have some people who I still connect with from undergrad, who, one of them being the woman from financial aid, I still talk to her, you know, and she still gives me feedback. So some people are willing to ride or die for you to ride, you know, and for years and years and years, and some are not. So just feel it out. like my dad taught me to always be nice, always be appreciative, always be grateful. People appreciate you, just telling them thank you for giving me this time, thank you for reading this, thank you. Never forget to say thank you. People work their booties off to give you feedback, and if when you don't say thank you and you just kind of walk away, that's like the one thing I will say, don't do that. You know, always say thank you. Always make sure you let them know that you appreciate everything they've done, because in the position in academia, we're just overworked. Like any other, I'm sure, like any other occupation, we all say we're overworked, but we really are overworked. So if we look at an application or an essay or whatever, just know we really did take the time out of our day to do that, you know, and because it probably has nothing to do, you're not, sometimes they're not even my students anymore. And I'm like, sure, I'll read your history essay. But because they built that bond with me and they keep coming back, like that's why I do those things for them. You know, if they weren't bonding with me, then why am I checking your essay for history, right? But when you make those connections, those really are those genuine connections, you know. um yeah, I don't know, tienes otra pregunta? I hope I answered it.
Yeah, I feel like you really addressed everything, but I just want to kind of sum up some of what I got, like the key takeaways. So
Yeah.
I like that you said to not take things personally. Sometimes you just, that time that you meet with someone, you never know. Like I'm super awkward in groups. Like I am introverted and I own it and it's fine. I'm really good one-on-one. So it's just like, okay, don't take it personally. However, people react to you meeting with them in whatever setting you're in. So you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their
Yeah.
personality is like. Don't take it personally. And then two, I really like that you said to think about different people outside of just professors as mentors. Because I know we have mentioned, how do you secure a mentor? And we usually
Mm-hmm.
refer to faculty, but
Yes.
thinking about staff members, thinking about peers, you know, there's peer mentorship.
Yes.
That's a thing. Thinking about outside of TAs,
Yes.
grad students.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different, even I've heard of folks who have made connections with like custodians or janitors,
Yes.
so they become friends with them and they're there as like your
I.
cheerleader, giving you that pep
Mm-hmm.
talk, tu puedes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you got this, ponte las
Yeah.
pilas, like you know, that helps too. That's like
It's
emotional
absolutely
support.
true.
Yeah.
Like I used to Santa Barbara when I was studying for my master's. You have an exam that you take for 8 hours, 4 hours per day. And we had to read like a bunch of like stuff. And I remember sometimes we would read on campus in like one of like the rooms, and the custodians would come in and they'd be like, ¿Qué tienen? ¿Qué hacen? Or whatever. And they'd clean and we'd tell them, they'd be like, okay, I las veo. And towards like, yeah, you know, years pass and they'd always ask, like, ya terminaron, ya terminaron, ya han terminado. Or like, one thing was I hated one of these people in the building that I worked in. And that woman just bothered me all the time. And it was always like an issue of like, just like ignoring my living, like my presence. And I hated that. I hate when people just do not acknowledge you, because it's just the worst feeling to have someone not even acknowledge your existence. So I remember I was telling one of the custodians, because she had just walked by and she just like, you know, nose up and just like ignored me. And I told them, mira, ¿viste eso? Ella trabaja conmigo, ella ni me hace caso, you know. And I remember they're like, esa, ay, esa es bien déspota. And, you know, they dropped dimes on her. They dropped dimes on her office. They dropped dimes on like so many things. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm not crazy if the
Yeah.
workers themselves do not like her because of the
Mhm.
way that she behaves, or that she, you know, handles certain situations in which they're part of. So when I, you know, expressed myself, they were like, ay, ni te preocupes por esa, porque, you know, and then I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Or like, just like different things. Like, I feel like the Spanish in my, and it keeps like running away from me because there's less and less Spanish being spoken around me. So the workers on campus and even in my apartment complex, I'd always talk to them in Spanish. And I remember some of them would be like, ya párale de hablar así, porque, you know, they'd be like, yo quiero, you know, I remember one guy was like, I'm trying to be a manager and I'm trying to move up and I can't, you know, speak in Spanish. Like, I need to learn English. And I was like, okay, pues hablamos en inglés, o, you know, no más. But I felt like that was like when I felt like comfortable on campus, when I felt at home, or when I was homesick, really, or when I felt like fuck this place, like I don't feel like I belong, and why am I here? And then bumping into a custodian and then them saying like, ay, qué bueno que estás aquí, ¿cómo te va? And you can't really tell them you're having a bad time, because to them they're like, this is the best opportunity ever for you, and we work these shitty ass jobs, and we love seeing people that look like us make it in places like this versus us, you know, being the outsiders, right? When they see us being, you know, on the other end with power in their opinion, um it makes them happy. And for me, it was just a matter of like feeling like, okay, I feel at home. I feel like I'm in, you know, in my environment. I feel in community because they get me, or they're like, you know, speaking in Spanish, and I miss that. So sometimes even those people become just family, just people who can be supportive in ways that you don't need it to be so uberly like in your face, like, I, you know, like, how can I help you? But it's more like la porra, you know, like you said, like la porra itself, like just being happy for you and rooting you on when you see them, it makes a difference, you know. On those bad days when I just didn't know, you know, if I was gonna make it for the next week, just seeing them made me go home and rethink everything and be like, you know what, this is what I want to do. And as hard as this is right now, nothing compares to, you know, my mom works at a factory, my dad is undocumented, so they struggled as well. So a lot of that reflection also goes back to our parents and how hard they work. And I've never have to, you know, work a labor's job. And so I'm very privileged in that way. And so to make complaints sometimes feels like, and I think this goes back to like women of color feeling like you can do everything and we can't. And that's really the reality, we can't. But the idea that we have to take up these burdens, you know, and so I don't want to say, oh, siempre I can make it, but to the very least, I know that I come from very strong women, a strong legacy, right? Like my mom in general, like to come here in the 20s. Like I didn't mention this, but when I wanted to transfer back from my BA to LA and finish, my mom came to Humboldt and drove like crazy amount of hours. And she basically told me, I'm not letting you transfer because because of, she knew it had to do with racism, me facing racism and never having experienced that in LA at the level that it was at. And she was like, look, when I first got here, I cleaned houses and I got spat at. And I didn't only get spat at by adults, I got spat at by their children. And I went back the next day to work. So if you want to be upset about these people in your classroom, don't, because they're nobodies. They're not paying your rent and they're not going to change anything. Like you need to do your education and graduate and prove these people wrong. That just stuck with me, you know. Was I upset with my mom? Yes. Did I understand what she was trying to say? Yes, because she was my age at that point. Well, she was like 21 when she was here. So, but that was her experience, you know? So like, this is nothing compared to this, although we shouldn't be comparing PTSD, basically trauma. But I felt like I understood what she was trying to say though. Like, we're gonna better our family and you don't need to go through these fucked up situations and let that affect you the way it's affecting you, because I didn't when I was, you know, going through far worse than you know, and in a position where you can be deported or fucking, you know, just completely erased from this place in any second. And so yeah, those are the things you reflect on. And then when you're there, people who are the workers will tell you their stories similar to that, and you'll think about your parents or you'll think about your family and you'll say, damn, like I'm very privileged to be here and I want to better these communities. And I hope that whatever I do brings the resources so that more individuals can get a better living experience, a living expense, you know, a living wage that you can make it in, you know?
What you're saying is just reminding me about the importance of storytelling, of oral histories, of knowing or thinking about mentoring outside of just a formal relationship, but actually like there are a lot of individuals out there who may not have a formal education who can still be your mentor, can still be part of your community.
My daddy was a prime example. Like he didn't get far in schooling, but he was very smart, and he did construction, and he actually did various occupations. And I always felt like, how the hell does this dude learn a new, job occupation? Other people want to get certificates before they feel confident to do it. And as a person who's undocumented, you got to make things work, and you become this like chameleon of skills. Like you just, so yeah, I agree. Like there's people who have resources for you that never went into the university, and you also have to consider, those. And you haven't even mentioned this family, like your parents, or I know I call my mom all the fucking time, to the point where my dad one time was like, stop calling your mom, you're freaking her out, she's freaking out, like you're having a bad time, and now she's having a bad time, stop telling her you're having a bad time. And I was like, okay, I will tell my mom that I'm having a bad time, I give it to myself, but that was my that was who I felt comfortable telling all these problems to. And she was just like, overwhelmed. So in other ways, I also realized, to close all this off, sometimes it's not mentorship you're looking for, it's therapy. And I unfortunately didn't look for therapy. I have anxiety and panic attacks. And I had them all through undergrad, and I always thought it was because I was a first gen that I just was freaking out, and my body was just responding
Oh my
weird because I
gosh,
didn't know,
same.
because I'm like so new and I don't know what I'm
Mhm.
doing. And then when I got into my master's program, I was with my now wife. Her family was like, dude, they work in the medical industry. They're like, dude, you're having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. Do you know what this is? And I'd be like, no, I don't, what, huh? And then I started seeking, help. And I wish I had sought help before as an undergrad. It would have helped in so many ways. It's okay. It happens the way it was supposed to happen. So as a grad student, I think you have to make that decision. Like if you are not feeling okay, go seek therapy, go seek counseling. And if you don't find someone who works for you, keep going. I know doing that during grad school is hard, even at the beginning, but trust me, throughout the experience, throughout the years, you're gonna appreciate that you had, seeked help elsewhere, because you can't do this by yourself. You really can't. At the moment, I'm taking time off. I'm almost done, and I had to take it off because of my dad's passing and Inez's passing. And I just felt like I needed a break, and I gave myself that opportunity.
And you deserve it. Everybody has their own timeline, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, so just, just listen to yourself, and take care of yourself, because there's no point to graduating with your degrees if you're gonna come up fucked up. Like
Yeah.
you can't function that way. So don't like overdo it to the point where you just can't even work because you fucked yourself up, emotionally, mentally, physically,
Yeah.
all these things. So that's the last thing I'll say. It's pretty intense, but it really is another part of surviving. It's part of the mentoring, but it's a different kind of mentor because you pay them and you're there to pay them. But unfortunately, sometimes our problems are a lot, especially in grad school. And I realized that when my mom was like she felt overwhelmed, that okay, I need to, find I need to go back to therapy, and I need to talk to someone who gets paid for this and who can help me and listen to me. And I won't feel this like huge burden of like, oh my God, is my mom going to have a mental breakdown because I'm having a mental breakdown?
Yeah.
But then you learn how to talk to them and still tell them things, but not to the point where they feel like, oh my God, she's not okay or something. Which my mom felt a lot of the time, but I was okay. I just think that I was on the verge of mental breakdowns, and that's just grad school for some reason is just one of the hardest things you can really commit to. And even though I had a master's already, and I had already gone into a master's program, being 1,000% honest, it didn't make it any easier to do my PhD. It's been just as hard, if not harder. So you can be as prepared as you want, but sometimes the experience is just bigger than yourself, and you need to seek help so that you can
I
survive.
I think we all could benefit from professional, like formal and informal forms of support. So I'm constantly reminding students, like, if you have access to resources and to mental health resources in particular, definitely take advantage of them. Like, we can all benefit from it. I think that's a
Yes.
great way to wrap things up. One last
Yes.
question for you, just before you
Sure.
go. How can my listeners connect with you? If they resonated with you, want to be in touch, want to follow you,
Yeah.
how can they reach you?
So they can reach me, of course, on the website. We have a contact form at Latina Chica Speaks magazine.com. I'm already getting tongue-tied too. You can also email me at latinachicaspeaks@gmail.com. And whatever you guys want to ask, you guys can also check out, which is a secreto, but I'll let it out of this bag. Yvette's going to be on my show at Intersection of Combos, which is another podcast that we have for the magazine. We have 3 different podcasts, one for the magazine, one Comadreando Hour, one Intersectional Conversation.
You stay busy.
I stay busy, girl. But check that out. You'll be on there. So if you have other questions about, the university, check Intersectional Combos out. It's a really good podcast. And the IG page is so cute. I think that a lot of us, like yourself, we enjoy leaving even little resources and little gold nuggets in our feeds, in our grids. So even beyond just the podcast episodes, we have way other stuff going on in the IG. And on the website, of course, we share everything. So just sign up to our email list. Maybe you want to make sure you follow everything I do on there, because we have a bunch of things going on. But thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you so much, Ana.
Thanks so much for joining me in the Grad School Femtoring podcast. If you liked what you heard, please rate this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere you tune in. You can also support the podcast by donating to my Patreon page, Anchor page, or Venmo account, which is at Grad School Femtoring. If you have questions or episode topics, you can contact me by sending me a DM on Instagram, sending me an email to gradschoolfemtoring@gmail.com, sending me a voice message on Anchor, or sending me a message via my personal website at YvetteMartinezvu.com. Until next time.